Thank you for joining us. The violence of the past 4 days between Israel and Hamas is prompting political statements here in Canada and now from President Joe Biden in the last hour. This morning, a BC man is believed to be the second Canadian in the attack by Hamas. We'll hear the latest. Here at home, BC's fall campaign for vaccines against COVID and influenza begins today. The BC Centre for Disease Control will take your calls. After 12:30, heat pumps. Can they cut your energy costs and your carbon footprint? I'm Michelle Eliot. Welcome to BC Today. Thank you for joining us on CBC Radio 1 and live streaming on CBC Gem, cbc.ca/BC, and on the CBC Vancouver YouTube page. We start with the latest on the war between Israel and Hamas. Hamas fired rockets into the Israeli coastal city of Ashkelon today, after warning Israelis to leave the southern port city. Missiles were intercepted by Israel's Iron Dome defense system. Meanwhile, in the Gaza Strip, Israeli warplanes are reducing buildings to rubble and sending people scrambling to find safety. Israel is claiming it has now secured the border with Gaza. The number of those killed on both sides keeps rising. There are more than 1,000 Israeli fatalities, while the health ministry in Gaza says 830 people have died in airstrikes there. All of this as Israel is vowing retaliation for Hamas's surprise attack over the weekend. The United States now is responding to the events of the past 4 days. President Joe Biden is promising fresh military aid for Israel.
My team has been in near constant communication with our Israeli partners and partners all across the region and the world from the moment this crisis began. We're surging additional military assistance, including ammunition and interceptors, to replenish Iron Dome. We're going to make sure that Israel does not run out of these critical assets to defend its cities and its citizens. My administration has consulted closely with Congress throughout this crisis. And when Congress returns, we're going to ask them to take urgent action to fund the national security requirements of our critical partners. This is not about party or politics. This is about the security of our world, the security of the United States of America. We now know that American citizens are among those being held by Hamas. I've directed my team to share intelligence and deploy additional experts from across the United States government to consult with and advise Israeli counterparts on hostage recovery efforts. Because as president, I have no higher priority than the safety of Americans being held hostage around the world. The United States has also enhanced our military force posture in the region to strengthen our deterrence. The Department of Defense has moved the USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group to the Eastern Mediterranean and bolstered our fighter aircraft presence. And we stand ready to move in additional assets as needed. Let me say again, to any country, any organization, anyone thinking of taking advantage of this situation, I have one word: don't. Don't.
That's U.S. President Joe Biden speaking in Washington in the last hour. All of this comes as we learned this morning of a second Canadian confirmed killed by Hamas militants. Ben Mizrahi from Vancouver was in his early 20s. A friend of Mizrahi is Aaron Shaplarosh. He spoke to CBC News. He began by speaking about their time together in high school.
He was on the basketball team at King David High School. He was a very warm soul. He was very friendly with everybody. He was kind of the life of the party in a way. He was very kind to everybody. He was a very warm soul, a very kind soul. And, he was always ready to help anybody that needed it. He was very friendly with everybody. And, it's just devastating to hear this news. He was so full of life. That's kind of how I would describe him. He was full of life. He was always smiling. That's kind of the one thing I remember about him is just, he was always smiling. He was always laughing. He was joking around with people, just having a good time with people, just enjoying life. And that's what he was doing Saturday morning. Also at the music festival in Israel, when around 6:37 in the morning, Hamas militants entered that music festival and started massacring and kidnapping hundreds of innocent civilians that were at that music festival. And the whole community, his high school and the whole community was just came together immediately in support of Ben. And, we were organized, just praying that he would be found safe. We learned Saturday that he was missing. We were all hoping for the best, that he'd be found alive and safe. And to be honest, we were, optimistic that he would be found, alive and well. But unfortunately, we found out early this morning that that he was found deceased, unfortunately. And it's just been tremendously difficult. His parents are very, very involved in the Jewish community. His mother is a teacher at a local Jewish elementary school. My wife is very close with Ben Mizrahi, the blessed memory's mother. And it's just a huge, huge loss for the Vancouver Jewish community. The Vancouver Jewish community is a very tight-knit community. And, it's very painful. We feel this loss very, very deeply. It affects us all on a personal level. All of us, everybody in the Jewish community knew Ben Mizrahi and his family. As I said, he was just a very warm, approachable soul person, and everybody knew him. Everybody was friends with him. Everybody was friendly with him. And just to have a devastating loss like this, it just really hits straight to your heart.
Aaron Chaplarosh is a friend of Vancouver's Ben Mizrahi, who died in the attacks by Hamas. Meanwhile, in Gaza, 830 people have been killed and thousands more wounded. Mira Sukharov is a political science professor at Carleton University, and she told CBC's The Early Edition this morning that Palestinian civilians there have little opportunity to find safety.
And when Israel warns before striking, it's possible potentially for residents of a building to possibly leave the building, but there's really nowhere to go in Gaza. It's a very small space. It's very heavily populated. And remember that Israel controls all the airspace. There's no independent Gaza airport. Israel controls the sea perimeter, and along with Egypt, Israel controls the only two land crossings. So there is a sense that when Israel pummels Gaza with airstrikes, perhaps it will be ground forces as well. We don't yet know. But when Israel launches airstrikes, it's like shooting fish in a barrel.
Mira Sukharov is a political science professor at Carleton University. We'll have much more on this story throughout the day here on CBC Radio, on cbc.ca/news anytime, and on your CBC News app. It's 12:15, 1:15 in the Mountain Time Zone. You're with BC Today here on CBC. To some updates on healthcare in the province now, BC has become the first province to sign an individual health deal with Ottawa. The deal will see the federal government shift $1.2 billion to BC over 3 years. In exchange, the province has developed a plan to increase patient access to team-based family healthcare and mental health addiction services. Provincial Health Minister Adrian Dix was joined by federal counterparts to announce the deal this morning, where he also urged people to get vaccinated against respiratory viruses this fall.
And what we can all do at this time together, what we can all do together to contribute and to help one another, to help those that we love and those that we don't know, and especially to help those people who are working here in healthcare, is to get vaccinated. And I strongly encourage people to get involved in that campaign and take all the actions they can to limit the spread of respiratory illness in this winter, when we also will be delivering record numbers of surgeries and record numbers of diagnostics exams and see record numbers of people in our public hospitals. It is important for us all to do, and I strongly encourage you to do that. Everyone now in BC understands our system. BC, they'll get their invitations. When you get your invitation, please book your appointment. At the core of
BC's Health Minister Adrian Dix speaking this morning. And BC does begin that fall immunization campaign today, with influenza and COVID-19 vaccinations now available in pharmacies across the province. Health officials, as you heard, urging you to stay up to date on both, and invitations will be sent to priority groups first. This comes as the BC Centre for Disease Control has found new infections on the rise. We're going to hear from the BC CDC in just a moment, and we are taking your calls as well. Are you planning to get your flu and COVID-19 vaccinations? What are your questions about the updated COVID-19 vaccines? And what do you want to know about ways to reduce your own risk? You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. By email, you can send your questions, bctoday@cbc.ca. Dr. Monica Naus is the Medical Director of Immunization Programs at the BC Centre for Disease Control, as well as the Vaccine Preventable Diseases Service. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us, Dr. Naus.
Hello, can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can sure hear you just fine. Can you take us through what's happening today?
So the immunization program is rolling out across the province. And so invitations started going out on the 4th of October already. And the priority groups for early vaccination are healthcare providers, as well as older adults, so people over 65. And so if people have been registered in the past through the Get Vaccinated system for COVID vaccines, they will have received an invitation by text or by email, whatever the preference they've set up. And if they haven't registered, they can do so online at the Get Vaccinated site of the BC government. And there's also a call center number that people can call if they don't have devices that can be used to book an appointment. A lot of vaccination will be happening again through pharmacies, but public health clinics will also be starting up. And in some of our health units, COVID vaccines will also be offered by family physicians, primary care practitioners, and that varies, but all of that information is available online.
Okay.
Or through the yeah.
And if people do have family physicians, how will they know that those vaccines are being made available there?
They can definitely connect with the family doctor's office and find out whether they're offering both vaccines. Many family doctors will be offering influenza vaccines, even if they may not be offering COVID vaccine. But I think many people will want to go to a single site to get both vaccines.
Okay, can you just go back a little bit and take us through the priority groups? You mentioned healthcare workers first, and who else would be included in that list?
Residents of long-term care. So vaccinations in those facilities have already begun. And then people with underlying medical conditions. So I think there's a lot of familiarity already with what those are, but people with chronic heart or lung disease, diabetes, cancer, immunosuppression. So those are also on the priority list, and some of those invitations will be going out specifically. And then, but I think it's important to know that both influenza and COVID vaccines this fall are being offered to anyone older than 6 months of age. But it's particularly important that older adults and people with underlying medical conditions get vaccinated.
Okay, I'm joined by Dr. Monica Naus, the Medical Director of Immunization Programs and Vaccine Preventable Diseases Service at the BC Centre for Disease Control. And today, as that fall immunization program begins in BC, we're taking your calls. What are your questions about the updated COVID-19 vaccines? What do you want to know about reducing your own risk? Our numbers again, 1-800 825-5950, 604-669-3733, pound 690 on your cell phone. By email, we are at bctoday@cbc.ca. Colleen is our first caller now, joining us from Vancouver. Hi, Colleen. Welcome.
Hi, thank you very much for taking my call. This
Sure.
is most timely for me. I already have COVID. I tested positive yesterday. Should I still get a vaccine? Will it improve my level of immunity going through the winter?
And when should you get that, I guess, is a question you have too.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm not going anywhere for about a week, but yes.
Right. Okay. Colleen, if you want to just hang on the line, okay, we'll put that question to Dr. Naus. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dr. Naus?
So in general, if you've had COVID, what we call wild type, this natural infection will boost your immunity to COVID, and you don't need to rush to go get a vaccine. You can still go get your influenza shot, and we do, recommend that you should. COVID infection won't provide any protection against influenza, so these vaccines are very specific. So once you've recovered from COVID and you're feeling better and able to get out and about, you can go get your flu vaccine. But the COVID vaccine, you can definitely defer, and perhaps you can consider that to be your fall booster against COVID. Unfortunately, for you, you've experienced the infection instead of the vaccine. But there shouldn't be any need to get a booster dose or a dose of the COVID vaccine this fall if you've just had an infection. On the other hand, not everybody gets a confirmed COVID infection diagnosis, so people may not test themselves. And if they've had a recent respiratory infection and they fully recovered, they can proceed with getting a COVID vaccine. But in your case, if you know that this was COVID, there's not a particular reason for you to get vaccinated.
Okay, Colleen, so no rush there to get your vaccine, according to Dr. Naus. And how did you confirm that you do in fact have COVID?
Just a rapid test from the drugstore.
And Dr. Naus, would you consider that confirmation then?
Yes, yes, for all practical purposes. Mm-hmm.
All right. How are you feeling, Colleen?
I'm feeling better. I took an Advil last night and slept 11 hours, and I'm feeling better just from having gotten rest, but I am really sorry to be missing a beautiful reunion event by about 1 day within my isolation margin there. So I'm just trying to perk myself up by counting my many blessings carrying on.
You've got the right attitude and a good decision there. Let's perhaps, Colleen, thank you so much. All the best to you as you recover. Dr. Naus, you are seeing an uptick. We have seen an uptick in BC since this summer when it comes to cases. First of all, I guess for people who have been through it, I've heard certainly anecdotally of people who have contracted the illness. What is the advice for this, the new subvariants in terms of care at home or when you have to go to emergency?
I think the advice really hasn't changed. So if you have a high-risk medical condition, and there are specific criteria for treatment with a medication called Paxlovid, and the information for that is available online as well. So people who may have immunocompromise or specific risk factors for severe disease can avail themselves of that. But there are, for most individuals, it sounds like Colleen's got a fairly mild illness. It's similar to managing any other viral respiratory infection. So try to minimize your contact with others. You can take antipyretics if you have a fever. If you have a cough, you can try throat lozenges and whatever you find helps you with your cough. But most people will not need to be seen by a healthcare professional and will be able to get through their infection without complications.
Colleen, thank you very much for the call. Karen is up next now in Victoria with a question about the COVID-19 vaccine as the immunization campaign does start today in BC. Hi, Karen. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you. I'm very disappointed that when I got my invitation, Too late. I'm pretty sick. And I have not tested, but it's been over a week. And the chest is quite congested, and I have type 1 diabetes and asthma. And so I just would like to ask the doctor how long I should wait before I go and get this vaccine and flu shot.
So a similar question, but with some complicating factors here.
And also, we don't really know that this is COVID. So unless there's a particular reason to suspect that it's COVID, there are other respiratory illnesses around at this time of year. My own daughter was unwell for about a week and tested herself twice for COVID and was negative both times. So she's and she's back at school. So I think that if you don't know that this was COVID, then I think that once you've recovered, and especially if you're diabetic, it's a good idea to get both flu vaccine and COVID vaccine.
So I don't need to have a time period in which I've recovered to go and get it?
We would say, if it was real COVID, if you had tested positive for COVID, for instance, and you can still test, then we generally say 3 months, wait 3 months. But if you don't know, it could have been a variety of other respiratory viruses, then I would just wait until you're fully recovered and up and about.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Karen, it sounds like you're having a bit of a tough time there. I'm sorry to hear that.
Well, that's okay. I need to get off my butt and get tested.
Okay. Sounds like it. Thank you very much, and all the best to you. It's Karen in Victoria. Lots of questions are coming in. Howard is up next now in Ladner with a question about COVID-19 vaccinations. Hi, Howard.
Hi. I think I may have just when I was talking to your producer and before I could listen again, this may have been answered just now, but basically 2 simple things. Are we supposed to still wait 6 months since our last vaccination before we get the next?
Okay, since the vaccination, and what about if you've had COVID?
Yes, like if since the last vaccination, which I've got all the ones regularly, had COVID, am I supposed to wait 6 months from that point?
In general, yes. There are some exceptions, and some shorter intervals will be accommodated for people. For example, if you're leaving the country and you want to get vaccinated this fall before you leave, then shorter interval can be accommodated. But in general, the invitations are going to be recommending that people get their vaccine after 6 months have lapsed since your last dose. And very few people will have been vaccinated this spring because the spring program was really aimed at those at highest risk. So it wasn't a general population program as this fall's program is.
Well, I'm in my 80s.
Okay. Yeah, so ideally 6 months, but if there are reasons why you can't wait that long, then there are some, provisions, and you probably have to book that appointment through the call center.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Howard. And that website as well, if you'd like the information, is gov.bc.ca/getvaccinated. Just a couple more questions for you here, Dr. Naus. We have an email from Corey in Courtney who writes, I'm a healthcare worker with long COVID, and I'm only able to work part-time due to long COVID and its disabling symptoms. And here, Corey writes about the booster program. My last booster was a year ago. My spouse, who is younger, healthier, and works from home, was invited for a booster in the last year, but myself and my kids have not. So how can we trust the vaccine system if it appears to be missing people or selecting people seemingly randomly for vaccines? Thanks for any insight. So it sounds like Corey's wondering there why she has not received an invitation in the last year, but her family has.
So as a healthcare worker, I would expect that she would have been invited to get vaccinated last fall, but the program this spring wasn't for healthcare workers. It was really for residents of long-term care, older adults, people who are immunocompromised. So, I don't think that she would have expected to receive an invitation this spring. So,
I do realize it's a specific scenario as well that she's
mhm.
raising there, but I guess the decision making around who gets invitations or not would be the more general question from that.
Well, the active invitation is going to people who've registered within the system. So if they haven't registered, they're not going to get an invitation, and there will be ways to either register online or to book an appointment by calling the call center.
Okay.
So, this is a system that was specifically set up for COVID. So most people are familiar with it by now. And it allows people to be contacted, electronically in order to get an invitation.
And how is care for people with long COVID? How is it going? Is it continuing in BC? What do we know about the cases right now?
I'm not the expert on that, so I can't answer the
Sure.
question. But
Okay.
there's a lot of new literature coming out all the time about this condition. And the interesting thing is some of that literature points to, prolonged recovery times after a variety of viral infections, including COVID.
And finally, Dr. Naus, there are 2 vaccines available in BC. How will we know which one is most appropriate for us? Who will make that choice?
Your provider will, but either vaccine can be used in most circumstances. Some people have had a preference. And with the Moderna vaccine, it's fewer doses for younger children. And it may be the preferred product also for people with immunocompromise. But both products will be available. And we expect that later this fall, for people who cannot or do not want to get an mRNA vaccine, the Novavax will be reformulated for the strain that's circulating now.
Okay. Are we still waiting for approval for that one?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Dr. Naus, I really appreciate you taking calls. Obviously, people are interested in this. So very glad to have you on to take these questions. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Dr. Monica Naus is the Medical Director of Immunization Programs at the BC Centre for Disease Control. Now, the phone number to get registered is 1-833-838-2323. That's 1-833-838-2323. And the website is gov.bc.ca. You can see that phone number and the website on our live stream right now as well on YouTube or cbc.ca/BC. It is 12:33 now, 1:33 in the Mountain Time Zone. You're with BC Today here on CBC Radio 1 and live streaming too. You can watch us on YouTube. CBC Vancouver is where you can find us, cbc.ca/BC, or you can use the CBC Gem app. And coming up in our next half hour, has switching to a heat pump affected your energy cost? Is it saving you money? Is it helping to save the planet? We'll talk about that and take your calls on that too. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can start calling us now. That's all coming up after the CBC News Update with Robert Zimmerman.
Good afternoon. Members of the Vancouver Jewish community are mourning the loss of a young man who was killed in the Hamas attack in Israel on the weekend. Ben Mizrahi was one of hundreds of people killed at a music festival not far from the Gaza Strip. Mizrahi was 22 years old and graduated 5 years ago from King David High School here in Vancouver. BC has signed a tailored bilateral healthcare funding agreement with the federal government, becoming the first province to reach such an accord in Canada. Federal Health Minister Mark Holland says the funding will see Ottawa shift $1.2 billion to BC in the next 3 years as part of a 10-year commitment to support provincial health care efforts. And as we've been hearing on the show, the province has launched its flu and COVID immunization campaign, with vaccinations now available in pharmacies across BC. The campaign begins as the BC Centre for Disease Control says COVID hospitalizations, new infections, and deaths are trending higher. And now the forecast on the north coast. The chance of showers this afternoon with strong winds and a high of 13. Highs up to 14 with a chance of showers and some sunshine in the Peace. In the central interior, a high of 16 with a mix of sun and cloud. You may also see some showers there. Highs to 17 with a chance of showers in the Kootenays. In the southern interior, a chance of showers with a high of 16 degrees. And for Metro Vancouver, Greater Victoria, and the Fraser Valley, more rain this afternoon with some strong winds and highs to 13. I'll have more local news at the top of the hour. Now back to Michelle with BC Today.
Thank you, Rob. Have you tried at all to look into the heat pump phenomenon?
I know because we have electric baseboards.
Okay.
We got rid of our furnace several years ago.
Oh,
So
you did.
yeah, so the baseboards, I don't believe you can hook up to a heat pump.
We're gonna find out. I thought that they could be, but we'll find out. I don't really know
Let me know on
how
that.
things work.
Maybe I can hook it up to my air fryer. I don't know. Maybe that will work.
Yeah, there you go. The air just circulates and then is
Yeah.
used to fry things.
Does everything, that air
You
fryer.
are inventing something new.
It's not the first time.
Rob, thank you very much.
All right.
Rob Zimmerman in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. Lots of questions to be answered in the next half hour here. Welcome back here with BC Today here on CBC. We're on Radio 1, 88.1 FM in Metro Vancouver, live streaming as well on CBC Gem, cbc.ca/BC, and on the CBC Vancouver YouTube page. And yes, demand for heat pumps as a way to heat and cool our homes has gained traction over the last couple of years. But do they deliver on the promise of cutting costs and helping to cut greenhouse gas emissions? We'll hear from a researcher with the Canadian Climate Institute that's just released a report on those very questions. They found that heat pumps can save you money and can lessen your carbon footprint, but there are barriers to getting them. So we'll find out more about that, and we're asking you for your own experience. Has getting a heat pump cut your own energy bill? What's needed to improve access to them? Have you been hoping to get one perhaps in your home, but have been unable to? Love to hear from you. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. By email, you can share your thoughts too. It's bctoday@cbc.ca. And joining me now is Sarah Miller, research lead in adaptation at the Canadian Climate Institute, and she joins me from Victoria. Hello, good afternoon.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
Thank you for joining us. Perhaps we can quickly just answer Rob's question there. Can heat pumps be alternatives to electric baseboard heating?
For sure. We know that heat pumps can provide an alternative to, of course, a gas furnace, but also to electric baseboards. Of course, if you've just recently put in a full set of electric baseboards, you might not be wanting to make another change right now.
Right.
But we do know that heat pumps, one of the main benefits above electric baseboards is they're much more efficient. So they can lower your energy bills quite substantially over baseboard heating.
Okay.
And we do know for some people in colder parts of the country, they might have a heat pump paired with electric baseboards as a backup heating system, which we can talk more about as well.
Absolutely. Thank you for getting us started with
of
that.
course.
Why did you want to look into the cost effectiveness of heat pumps in the first place?
I think you sort of summarized it off the top there. Heat pumps are a tool that we know is essential for decarbonizing our homes and building stock. So we know they're a really powerful tool in terms of reaching our greenhouse gas emissions targets. And we're starting to see uptake accelerate, not only in Canada, but really around the world. But there are still a lot of questions we know that people have, and a fair bit of uncertainty about different aspects of heat pumps, but in particular about cost. So we really wanted to look at how the costs of heat pumps stack up against traditional heating and cooling options, primarily a gas furnace and air conditioning for households across Canada, to give a more detailed picture of how households can expect the cost of a heat pump to stack up against alternatives that they might be looking at. So that's why we did the study. And we did find that for most households in cities across the country and in most building types and ages, that heat pumps do tend to be the lowest cost option over the lifetime of the system.
And how did you go about finding that answer?
So what we wanted to do is we really wanted to look at a Canada-specific and a regionally specific situation to give people as clear an idea as we could. So we looked at 5 cities across the country, including Vancouver in BC. We looked at 3 different housing ages. So an older home built around 1940, 1980s type home, which is, a lot of the building stock in Canada, and then a new build. And different housing types, so from single family through townhouse to apartment. So we ran the numbers. We looked at the operating costs as well as the capital and installation costs that you can expect. And we just ran those numbers over the lifetime of the different systems to give people a number for how these different options stack up.
Okay. What did you find in Vancouver?
In Vancouver, we found even more so than in most other cities, that heat pumps are really the most cost-effective option for households. This is particularly true for single-family homes and for townhomes, that heat pumps are substantially cheaper than installing a new gas furnace and air conditioning today. And that includes, I should say, we were intentionally conservative about a lot of our assumptions. So that includes even assuming a backup heating system, even though that might not be required in much of BC, where we have more moderate climates in parts of the province. So yeah, we found in the Vancouver case that heat pumps are really a slam dunk for most households.
And this is with regard to ongoing costs rather than the upfront costs, which people get rebates for. Is that right?
Yes. So what we found is that the upfront costs of heat pumps do tend to be higher than for alternative heating systems, but that rebates are quite effective in bringing those costs down. That being said, there are a lot of issues with rebates that I'm sure some callers will be able to speak to in terms of the complexity of actually accessing those programs. But on paper, the rebates are very effective. But also we found that the heat pumps have a far lower operating cost because they're highly efficient. So heat pumps, they simply move heat from one space to another rather than generating it, which allows them to operate, even 3 to 5 times more efficiently than your most efficient gas furnace today, and much more efficiently than electric baseboards. So that's delivering significant savings on energy bills for households. That balance out any incrementally higher upfront costs within just a couple of years.
Before I go to our first caller, Robert in Salt Spring Island, Sarah, you also found, though, that there are barriers to people being able to access heat pumps. Although we've seen the governments really push for these with those rebates, as you said, there's inequity in terms of people being able to access them. What are those hurdles?
Absolutely. So we found that even though this might be the most economical choice for many households, there are a lot of barriers holding people back. So these range depending on the type of household that you're living in. But one thing we found, so there's the informational challenges around really understanding how your costs stack up, which is partly why we wanted to undertake this study. And part of that is people have difficulty predicting what their energy costs are going to be in the future, right? Like what the carbon tax is going to do in terms of their energy bills, what sort of gas price fluctuations are going to look like. So it makes people have a hard time being able to predict future costs. We also found that the rebate programs, while they're quite generous financially, they're very complex often, and you have to navigate multiple different programs at multiple levels of government. You often have to wait to get your rebate until after the installation process is complete, which means carrying quite a significant cost for a long period of time.
Right.
You have to pay up front. As well, oftentimes renters and people in condos are not able to access the rebate programs. So you also see structural barriers that are limiting parts of the population from being able to access these cost savings. So we really focused our policy recommendations on encouraging governments to streamline the programming that exists and to broaden it out to ensure that more of the population is eligible to address some of those structural barriers.
Okay, let's go to a caller now, Robert.
For sure.
On Salt Spring Island. Hi, Robert.
Hello.
Hi, have you been looking into a heat pump?
Well, I have. I've talked to people on Salt Spring that have them. And I was just wondering, at our golf club, they have a heat pump, but it's not, of course, the heat pump is outside, but they've got these little things that you can have above a door, so you don't have to have the venting all through your house.
Okay.
And I wonder if your guest has heard about that.
I'm not sure if that's something you're able to speak to, Sarah, in terms of the actual physical qualities of a heat pump.
And also,
yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Robert.
You probably covered my questions just with the previous person, but I live by myself in sort of a small place. I'm also a landlord, but to put a heat pump in the two places, it would be pretty expensive, and it would take a long time. Given the price of electricity right now, it'll take a long time to pay for the heat pump. What I guess you probably covered that already, but what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean that's very much the conversation we're having right now is the cost effectiveness for homeowners and residents like yourself, Robert. And so, how long did you kind of do some math around it?
Yeah, it would take me about 10 years to pay for the outside large heat pump and then venting underneath the floorboards and that sort of thing, because I've got electric baseboards now. So it's a lot cheaper, I think, if you've got a forced air furnace to put in a heat pump.
And so you're wondering if that's worth it in the end, right?
Well, yeah, I really do. I guess the other big thing about a heat pump, though, it can be used as an air conditioner in the summer. Yeah.
Yeah, it's you're weighing all the factors there, Robert. You know what you pay at first to get it installed and whether that will all amount to savings in the end, and not even taking into account the GHG factor there, right? But Robert, thanks so much for the question. How do people weigh those factors, Sarah?
Yeah, what Robert just spoke to, I think really encapsulates all the different factors that people are weighing as they're making these types of decisions, and they're major decisions, right? Like replacing your heating or cooling system is a significant financial decision that you have to make. So I love all the questions that you're asking. I can speak to a few different pieces there that he mentioned. First of all, just quickly on the actual system type. So you're referring to, there's two main types. There's ducted systems, which are best for households that already have ductwork. So that would have a furnace now, and then they can repurpose that ductwork. There's also mini split systems, which I think is what he's referring to at the school on Salt Spring. So these systems, people who do not have existing ductwork, this might be the best option for them, because putting in ductwork can be quite expensive and time consuming. So a mini split is just another type of system that delivers, you see an indoor unit and an outdoor unit, and the indoor unit is often mounted kind of high on the wall inside, and it will deliver heat to that specific room. And you can have one head or a couple of indoor heads. So if you do end up looking further into this route, I would suggest, a contractor can walk you through your options and help you identify the best choice. The other piece I think is really important to highlight is the decision about whether to install it in a rental home. We know one of the things that we identified as a major barrier for renters is that a lot of rebate programs you're not eligible as a landlord, so you need to be an owner-occupied household. So that just stacks the deck kind of further against renter households being able to access this technology, because even landlords who might want to upgrade their renters' heating or cooling system or put in cooling when they didn't already have it, as we know that's becoming more and more important, the financial situation might be more challenging if you don't have access to those rebate programs. So we're encouraging governments to consider expanding eligibility to more effectively capture renter households.
Okay, thank you so much. Going to the access issue that you were raising. Robert, thanks for the call. Our number again is 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. As we talk about heat pumps, are they cost effective? Have they been for you? And Marcia is on the line now in Vancouver. Hi, Marcia. What's been your experience?
Hi there. Thanks. My experience is last year I put a lot of effort into retrofitting my old home with a heat pump. In the end, it didn't end up working out because I needed more electricity, more power to be brought into the home, and that was prohibitively expensive. So I was sort of discouraged about that, but willing to do it. What's really discouraged me is a bigger piece, which is I discovered my brother this year, who's just moved into a new build. His house is completely outfitted with natural gas. He has a gas furnace, a gas stove, and I find the policies at cross purposes here with respect to decarbonization and encouraging heat pumps. On the one hand, I'm willing to make some financial sacrifices for electrical hookup. I'm willing to access the rebates, but where are we at in terms of decarbonization if new builds in Vancouver are being hooked up to natural gas, both for cooking and for heating, when probably we should demand that we have heat pumps for new builds as well.
So should there be more efforts towards that right now is what you're asking?
Well, I'm not even asking it. I think
Making the statement, rather, yeah.
Yeah, I'm making the statement.
Yeah.
It's a zero-sum game here. We're not getting any further ahead if all of the new builds in the city, or if that's being permitted, why? I mean, we have to do everything we can, but it's very discouraging for the city. On the one hand, I think the rebates in Vancouver are about $6,000. That's what I recall. That'd be $6,000. And then allowing these new builds to have natural gas.
Right, when they could just start off with
my
the heat
brother's
pump.
got a gas furnace and an air conditioner. And, I feel they should have installed a heat pump, and that should be a requirement of the city for new builds.
Right. Marcia, thank you very much. How are municipalities doing when it comes to that then with new builds?
Just like to say, I absolutely agree. I think it's new builds are something where we should be looking at electrifying everything. I think it's a no-brainer. And our research also finds that heat pumps in the all-electric scenario, so heat pumps with electric backup where necessary, are the most cost-effective option in new builds across the board. Vancouver is an interesting case. I would imagine that the building that you're referencing has just missed the window, but Vancouver has actually recently made some positive steps to go in exactly this direction going forward, to require clean heating and cooling in new builds. So that's a good thing, but it's definitely a patchwork across the province and across the country. Just to say, agree. I think new builds are somewhere where we should be electrifying. And like you said, it's a much easier thing to do it at the outset than to look into retrofitting old homes. And, you're willing to make the investment and the time investment to do that. And then seeing gas going into brand new buildings is definitely discouraging.
Yeah, some of the policy changes that Marcia's talking about there that are needed. Thanks so much for the call, Marcia, and making that point. You're right. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. Eric is up next now, joining us. Well, we talk about, the costs of the heat dome and, of course, the impact on when it comes to deaths. But Eric is calling us from Lytton. And so, Eric, welcome to you.
Hello.
Yeah, thanks very much for calling. What are your thoughts around heat pumps?
Yeah, so I'm just wondering, they also use water. And I'm wondering about if you have water meters, is there going to be an extra cost also on your water bill?
Is that a factor, Sarah?
So there's different types of heat pumps. The heat pumps that we looked at are air-to-air heat pumps. So they essentially move heat from one space into another. So they extract heat from the air outdoors, which they can do really effectively, even in colder climates, and move it indoors. Or to cool, they extract heat from the air indoors and move it outdoors. Water source heat pumps are, I believe, I'm not an expert on the technology types being used in Europe, but water source heat pumps are more prevalent in Europe rather than here, where they have more radiator systems.
Yeah, we have one here that is hooked up to the water system also, so it might be an older model. I'm not sure.
Right. Okay.
Interesting.
And go ahead, Sarah.
I was just going to add, there's also heat pump water heaters, which is another piece of technology around water heating, which we didn't explicitly look at, but that might also be a factor here.
Right. How are your costs, Eric, right now when it comes to energy use?
I'm not sure. We're in the interim home right now.
Yes.
And I was just wondering because we're going to get water meters downtown when they build, I assume, and I was just wondering about extra costs on a water bill. So
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thanks so much, and all the best to you as you stay in that interim home and await a permanent home in Lytton.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
That's Eric calling us from Lytton. Dawn is next now in Victoria, our final caller on this today, and tell us about your experience with heat pumps, Dawn.
Hi, thanks very much for taking the call. My experience has been great. I put one in 2010, and so far, up to the end of 2021, I saved $21,806 from putting this thing in. That's my total energy cost for the house. Right now, it's running about $2,700 a year, with the increased cost of oil because I replaced an oil furnace with the high efficiency heat pump.
Okay.
And there's a big difference between heat pumps too. I know there are some that won't work much below zero, and the one I have is a Mitsubishi, and it runs to minus 28 or minus 30 degrees. So I don't need any kind of backup heat at all for it, and that would apply to the vast majority of British Columbia households as well.
Yeah.
And my emissions have been down by about 95%, and that 5% is the 5% provision that's included in electricity today, because we buy some power at night from Alberta and possibly still from the northwestern states as well.
Okay.
So my carbon factor that I still have in the house relates to the carbon that's still embedded in the small little bit that's still embedded in hydro. I think hydro is now something like 97% green, if you wish.
You go far back too, to 2010.
2010, yeah.
Yeah. Don.
Yeah. So when I started off, and also just a couple of years ago, with this included, this is my total energy cost for the house, which is now just electricity. If I go back into 2005, for example, I was spending at that point $1,780 a year.
Okay.
And this past year, I'm at $1,158.
Okay. I have to wrap it up there, Don. Thank you very much for your call. Charlene writes, I took advantage of all the rebates in the fall of 2020, and the BC Hydro bills showed I saved 37% over the same time period. Brad is writing us about the noise pollution. That can be a new problem with that as well. Really interesting research, Sarah. Thank you so much for joining us and telling us about it. I have a feeling we're going to want to talk to you again.
Yes, anytime. Thank you for having me on, and thanks to everyone calling in with the great questions and stories.
Lots of questions there. Sarah Miller is a research lead in adaptation at the Canadian Climate Institute. That is it for us today. Now, we would love to see your photos of beautiful fall colors. It was a great weekend for it. Email them to us, bctoday@cbc.ca. We'll put them on the show throughout the week. We'll put you in a draw for a BC Today prize pack as well. We'll leave you now with some photos to enjoy from CBC's Andrew Kuryatta in Prince George. I'm Michelle Eliot. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back tomorrow.